A Canadian professional hockey player will later end up as one of the biggest cannabis smugglers in North America. He considers a smuggling business alongside a hockey career a profitable venture. His action will lead to his arrest, incarceration, and subsequent banning from re-entering the USA. How did a star who was at the height of his professional career end up as a drug lord to the point of bagging the King of Weed title? Keep watching until the end as we tell his incredible story. Our story begins in 1975, specifically in North Vancouver, British Columbia, a region known for its scenic beauty and vibrant community. North Vancouver has the appeal of recreational activities and outdoor sports. Almost every young person in the city is interested in one sport or the other. The sport that mostly piqued their interests is the game of hockey. So, like every other young person coming from North Vancouver and other parts of Canada, young Ryan John Phillips showed a deep interest in hockey. At a young age, he dreamt of becoming an NHL superstar. Interestingly, he had a support system, his father. From an early age, Ryan was practically born with skates on his feet and a hockey stick in his hands. His coach and biggest supporter was always right behind him, his dad. Encouraging and pushing him to work harder, his dad was determined to help Ryan achieve his dreams. While Ryan was focused on his goals, the relentless process often felt like a grueling test of endurance and willpower. He was always playing the game whenever an opportunity presented itself. At 16, he decided to take a path that will get him close to his dream. So he joined junior hockey leagues in Canada. The reason is simple. It was the surest gateway to the NHL. In case you don't know, NHL, National Hockey League, is a professional ice hockey league in North America, which comprises 32 teams, 25 in the United States and 7 in Canada. It is the world's 5th highest-grossing professional sports league in terms of revenue. The bitter yet simple truth is that there is no easy path to success. But could Ryan be ready for the many battles he had to fight to attain the ranks he wished? As we have said, Ryan's early life was not without its challenges, even with his talent and determination. First, there were the pressures and expectations of pursuing a professional sports career at a young age. Also, he faced some personal struggles, which contributed to a tumultuous childhood for him. One such struggle was from his team members. As the youngest player on the team, the older players took advantage of him. Sometimes, they would bully him. One night, they got him intoxicated and stripped him of his clothes. He woke up butt naked, getting urinated on. As if that was all, he also realized that the word rookie was written all over his body. That's the height of humiliation a young team member can suffer in the hands of the older ones. At that point, his dream of becoming a professional hockey player was being shattered. Ryan would spend the next 4 years in at least 14 households, including Vernon in 1994 to 95. One would expect him to share his experiences with his #1 fan when he got back home after the season, but he didn't. Instead, he kept the whole thing to himself and took solace in taking alcohol. After all, he had no friends. One night, Ryan decided to go to a bar. There, he ran into an old friend named Cain. Cain was so happy to meet Ryan that he introduced him to his other friends. Ryan watched him spend money like he is sharing candy to kids on the streets. The meeting led to a conversation between the two friends. Obviously, Ryan was curious to know about the source of income of Cain. Maybe he didn't know how he could ask him. But then, an opportunity presented itself. Cain asked Ryan if he was earning yet. He knew him as a hockey player. Ryan didn't hesitate to respond in the negative. When asked if he needed a job, he quickly responded in the positive, even without him knowing what job. Cain promised to reach out to him the next day. However, he asked him to bring his hockey kits. You'll soon learn what the kits were meant for. Ryan left for home that night with a great level of euphoria. Merely hanging out with Cain made him feel good. He hadn't felt that way in a long time, especially while he was away from home and found himself in a toxic environment. He was so anxious to know more about the kind of work Cain would give to him. The next day, Cain showed up at his home. Meeting Ryan's mother, he introduced himself as a music label owner. Obviously, Ryan's mother wasn't satisfied with his claims. It's a case of hate at first sight. Notwithstanding, she allowed him in. Next, the duo, Ryan and Cain, ended up in an isolated apartment. Then came the twist. Cain brought out a large quantity of marijuana and tabled it before Ryan. Ryan looked in amazement, wondering how he could make money off marijuana. In British Columbia in Canada, marijuana was a part of their culture. It was grown in abundance. In contrast, it was illegal in the United States. But despite its illegality, a good number of people continue to demand it, which explains why people are taking all risks to take the outlawed commodity into the States. You down with this, bro? All you got to do is take some stuff across the border for me. Easy work, man, easy work. Start unpacking your bag, man, Cain told him. He became more surprised when Cain dropped 20 pounds of marijuana in his hockey bag. I think that's why he asked him to bring his hockey kits along. At that point, Ryan had no choice but to do Cain's bidding since it was one of the ways he could get some bucks. What a huge risk, especially for a 19-year-old guy. Then the journey began. Ryan had to drive to the border, which was about an hour and 15 minutes. The urge to make quick money kept him motivated, but there was an issue. He realized a border patrol was behind him. He was scared to the marrow, considering that he was close to the border. Negative thoughts ran through his mind. Anyone who listened closely would hear his heartbeat. Suddenly, the patrol took a different route. With the disappearance of the patrol from his trail, he knew the coast was clear. As if that was enough, he came in contact with a border guard, who requested to see his passport and know his destination. He was more confident than before, so he looked the guard straight in the eyes and lied to him that he was going to play junior hockey at Tacoma, Washington. He was granted a pass, and that's how he accomplished the first mission. As a reward, Cain handed him $1,000. That's a huge amount of money, especially for a hockey player who was just trying to find his place in the world of sports. Throughout that summer, Ryan was doing the weed runs, making $1,000 at a time. He announced his final arrival. He could spend the way he saw Cain throw away money on the night they met. Ryan's values were getting eroded right before his eyes, but he didn't realize it earlier. At the end of the summer, something happened. Ryan got an offer for a pro contract in the United States to play professional hockey. The offer was from the Wichita Thunder of the East Coast Hockey League. Since it was the dream he wanted, he was ecstatic. Even his parents were full of joy. Their son could finally achieve his dream. But their joy was short-lived. Ryan immediately remembered all he experienced at his former team. The abuse, intimidation, and the likes. It wasn't a risk he wanted to take again. But on second thought, he accepted the offer. Hopefully, it could be an opportunity to retrace his steps from the new life he was living. It's time for his first game. With over 15,000 spectators, Ryan got on the ice and within a few minutes scored his first goal for his team. A pro goal for that matter. The goal threw the crowd into a wild jubilation. Then his eyes caught a young lady in the crowd, her face gleaming with a smile. Ryan didn't hesitate to ask his trainer to talk to her. Her name was Nicole. Ryan decided to tease her about his performance on the ice, but Nicole wasn't actually watching his play. On the other side of the world, Cain was bothered he hadn't heard from Ryan. He wondered if something was wrong with him. He reached out to him, asking him to return as the business was already booming. Ryan thought about it and concluded that it wasn't the life he wanted to live, not even at a time when he was getting along with everyone. Again, he thought he'd found someone he loved. With her, he felt complete and thought he could realize his dream with her. Life was good to him until he started drinking. As a popular pro hockey player, he always got free drinks at any bar he visited, both from bartenders and his fans. He would always retire to the bar after every practice, drinking excessively to the point that each day was an entirely new day to start training again. One day, after practice, Ryan left for home. On getting home, Nicole, who now stayed with him, told him she was pregnant. Ryan was shocked. He was just 20. He became confused about his maturity to become a father. More importantly, the money he was earning from playing hockey was barely enough for him. It's a chicken feed to start a family. On a Christmas day, Ryan's team coach told them there was an important game for them to win. So he banned them from consuming alcohol the night that preceded the match day. One would think every team member would heed the instructions of their coach. Unfortunately, Ryan defaulted. He got drunk to the extent that he couldn't play the match. His action cost him his place in the team. He was kicked out. Immediately, Ryan knew that was the end for him. Realizing there was no way forward for him, he decided to get back into the weed business. Cain came to his mind, but he had to find him. So he took Nicole to have a few bottles of wine at the bar. In the real sense, he hoped he would run into Cain since it was his usual joint. Meanwhile, Nicole didn't like Cain. Ryan had to tell her about how he smuggled marijuana across the border the previous summer because he needed money. He could see disappointment in the eyes of Nicole, who left the bar in anger. Apart from Cain, Ryan had a friend he used to play hockey with who had a special pass called the Pace Lane Sticker. For $500 cash up front, it allowed workers to cross the border without getting checked. It was like gold, a golden ticket to get things through the line. Everything was working beautifully until Cain found out about it. Ryan witnessed firsthand how Cain threatened the guy with guns because he was engaging in side deals. He was left in fear. Gun and violence weren't what he bargained for. He only wanted to make money and enjoy his life. Unknown to him, the smuggling business goes beyond making money. It's a high-risk venture with a lot of violence. Ryan concluded it was time for him to cut his ties with Cain. While he was smuggling into America, he already made some contacts that he could sell weed to. To further demonstrate his deep knowledge of the industry, he already knew most of the marijuana growers in British Columbia, Canada. A few weeks later, he was ready to make a shipment. This time, it was over 100 pounds of weed. While he was packing them into his bags, Nicole walked into the room. She saw the bed littered with weed. Although Ryan wanted to deny it, Nicole was quick to recognize weed. She resented the idea of smuggling weed. According to her, Ryan could end up in jail. That's if he's even lucky to survive the gun violence that often accompanies smuggling businesses. She didn't want to be a single mother, taking care of their daughter, Katie, alone if her father ended up in the grave. Nicole decided to save herself from the possibility of ending up a widow by quitting the relationship with Ryan. She took her daughter with her back to the United States. All entreaties from Ryan fell on deaf ears. It dawned on Ryan that she already made up her mind. Nicole failed to talk to him for weeks. Ryan's days of feeling rejected returned. He needed an outlet to unwind and feel accepted. Then he remembered he already made up his mind to operate solo. With the contacts he was ready to go. The moment Ryan decided to quit hockey and get back into the smuggling business, he wasn't aware his life was heading towards destruction. He possibly regretted that he left in the first place since he was making huge money. He thought to himself, "This is the life, bro." But deep down, he knew he was in trouble. The more he tried to stop, the more he found himself in the game. In short, he was already addicted to the lifestyle, fueled by the massive money he could make from it and the excitement that came with making money. Imagine a venture that could make him millions of dollars a year. That aside, the Canadian border is massive. Ryan was aware of this, leading him to think of how he could get through the wilderness. Eventually, he found one. Just 2.5 hours outside of Vancouver, there was a 12 kilometers logging road that led to the United States. With a new route within their reach, he put together a crew of his own. He explained the route to 4 hikers who could each carry 25 loaves of pot on their backs. They would bushwhack for about 6 to 8 hours, while the person to take the delivery would meet them on the U.S. side. Normally, he wasn't supposed to go with the crew, but he was just starting with them. He wouldn't want to trust them with a business, especially one that involved a lot of money. So he followed them. The next day, Ryan and his crew hiked through the wilderness. It was an easy ride, though. However, they finally got close to the border after about 8 hours of a rough ride. On getting to the other side of the border, there was an issue. The driver wasn't there yet. Ryan was bothered. Immediately, he knew something was wrong. After some moments, the driver showed up. He got relieved a bit, but as soon as he inquired from the driver about what caused the delay, he was shocked to be told about the possibility of him being tailed. At that point, he knew wasting further time would spell doom for them. He asked that they leave the scene as soon as they could, but it was too late. He heard a strange sound. It was the sound of a helicopter belonging to the United States authorities. It was hovering above their vehicle. Busted. There was no way out for them. They got yanked out of the car one after the other. Ryan and his crew went on their knees in submission to authorities, their faces down. Ryan was shaking like someone with a fever. He thought to himself about how he got into living such a life full of fear and chaos. He should have continued with his game of hockey. At least the bullying was no longer there, as he already found a team where everyone loved him. Ryan didn't need any seer to tell them he was already in trouble. His days of moving drugs and enjoying the life that accompanies it had just come to an abrupt end. And that was how he was arrested in 2000. But something happened before his arrest. Earlier, a few weeks after he ceased to be on the Wichita Thunder team, he had a new baby with his wife, Nicole, whom he met when he was 21 years old. It's expected that Ryan would be so happy to become a father. Or who wouldn't be happy to be called a father? It is one of the reasons why we get married, after all. In the case of Ryan, he wasn't really happy. And here's the reason. He just lost his source of income. There was just no way he would support the child. In fact, his lack of money was the reason why he stayed at his parents' place in Canada. He would spend the afternoon that his daughter, Katie, was born, getting drunk and high with his friends. He would later testify that he did all of that in anticipation of his great act of manhood, having a kid. But we think he took it too far. While in the euphoria, he drank to a point where he couldn't carry on with a conversation smoothly. Even at that, he still made sure there were enough bottles of Crystal and Crown Royal. If there was the opportunity, he could have done drugs there too. Upon getting home, he was met with a disgusting look from his parents and even his wife. But he wasn't deterred. Instead, he decided to throw his drinking and drug use in their face even more. Moments later, he held little Katie in his arms and said, "Katie, I'm your father, and I will always be there for you. You will be loved." And that's all. The next thing would be how he found himself in a federal detention center the following year after he was apprehended on the state side of the border. Subsequently, he was charged to court for conspiracy to import 103 pounds of banned plant, thereby ending up in incarceration. That's another phase of his life where he got an experience that impacted his life after his release. Keep watching to learn about what it was. Considered a flight risk, he was detained in a maximum facility and didn't see daylight for over 500 days. He was taken to Seattle Maximum Federal Penitentiary in Washington. There were about 150 inmates, some of them screaming and yelling, new fish, we're going to kill you." Those words alone were enough to send some fear down Ryan's fear. It was at that moment he realized there's nothing that could be compared to home. He thought about his parents, his wife and daughter, and most especially, his hockey career, which he substituted for money and excitement. His story is that of a fall from grace to grass. In the new environment, he felt like an animal that has been caged. No freedom, no friends. How would he cope with the inmates? Besides, he was even yet to be sentenced. The fear of being killed by the hostile inmates gripped him. There were different gang members, the Mexican Mafia, the Crips, the Bloods. Any of them could kill him the way we see it happen in movies. Even at that, he realized it's worse in real life than it is in movies. Life in prison isn't what anyone could imagine. Apart from the violent inmates, there was also the issue of unfriendly guards. Some of them, lacking empathy, treat inmates like some dog. He remembered an occasion when one of the guards beckoned on him to come to his room. He was scared as he didn't know why he had called him. What if he raped me? He thought to himself. But he went. On getting there, the guard asked him to take off his clothes as he suspected him to have drugs on him. Although he initially refused, he eventually consented to avoid further trouble. He took off his clothes while the guard checked to make sure he was clean. Once he was done, he asked him to put on his clothes. It was such an embarrassing moment for Ryan. He felt stripped of his humanity. Despite that his incarceration was solely Ryan's fault, his mother would always visit to encourage him. It was then he realized how much his mother loved him. He told her he was sentenced to 18 months in prison and barred from getting back into the United States. Remember, that's where his wife took his daughter, Katie, too. Ryan began to think about the words Nicole spoke at him at the time she walked away from him. He had literally lost everything that was important to him, his family and his dream of becoming a professional hockey player. Despite the numerous struggles and challenges he encountered in prison, there is one thing you cannot take away from Ryan: his resolve to overcome his troubles. He started making connections in there. The moment he told other inmates he's from British Columbia, they asked him if he could get them some BC bud. BC bud is a term used to describe high-quality cannabis grown in the province of British Columbia, Canada. British Columbia is renowned for its favorable climate and growing conditions, which contribute to the production of potent and high-grade marijuana. Ryan's time in prison was a turning point. He realized the importance of freedom and began to reevaluate his life's direction. But the moment he remembered that he would never be allowed back into the USA, he would become paralyzed with fear and depression. How would he clean up the mess he had created? In a desperate move to chart a new course for his life, Ryan took some counseling sessions. Slowly, he started to rebuild his life. Then, he remembered his talent and joined a prison hockey team. After all, it was a sport he once found his dream with. He promised to be a better person upon his release. Eventually, after 18 months, he was released. He also signed the papers saying he would never re-enter the US again. He was then escorted to Canada in a bulletproof van. The implication of the ban was that he would be separated from his daughter, Katie. Then, another source of worry came. What's the essence of his release if he wouldn't be able to see the daughter he always cherished again? Throughout the trip, he stared out the window, thinking about his little girl. What if I never see her again? He thought to himself. It was indeed a hard moment for him. But something spectacular happened again. Ryan, now a free man, soon forgot the promise he made to himself. Upon his release from prison, Ryan returned to Vancouver. There, he leveraged the connections he made while in prison to have a new gang. Soon, he had trucks modified to fit a certain amount of marijuana and a boat that could fit 400 pounds in the hull. Then, he also met someone who had a plane that could go across the border under the radar with 250 pounds in the plane. With the new connection, the possibility of making $250,000 was becoming a reality. In no time, he was making a huge amount of money. Shoeboxes turned into suitcases and big duffel bags. Though he had the money, he felt incomplete without his daughter, who at that time was 2.5 years old. He tried reaching Nicole several times, but she refused to pick up. He resorted to consuming heavy amounts of cocaine to numb himself. He would go out almost every night to get drugged under the guise of getting over the emotional troubles he was going through. But that would only make things worse, man. His drug use was getting out of control. The same thing with his smuggling business. He started going to extreme lengths to get supplies, to the point of getting involved with the Mafia. Russians, Mexicans, Chinese, and anyone that could supply his demand. Ryan soon became a target of several Mafia groups. He began to get death threats from different sides, each accusing him of stealing a portion of marijuana from them. 70 pounds of marijuana. That's a whole lot of money. Mafia are killers who would kill their target without hesitation if they messed around. Ryan began to live in fear. The fear was even greater than the fear of being arrested again. After the call from an unknown caller, accusing him of stealing 70 pounds of marijuana from them, he went to a restaurant in downtown Vancouver the next day. Before he knew it, it became a meeting point for gangsters. They approached him and asked him to pay the $2 million he owed them, else he would die. But he soon discovered that the $2 million wasn't for 70 pounds of weed. Rather, it was for 70 kilos of cocaine. He told them he wasn't a cocaine dealer. Maybe there was a mix-up, but they wouldn't agree. Ryan was given a day ultimatum to make the payment. The next day, he met with them at a warehouse. The gang maintained that he had to undergo a lie detector test to prove his innocence. The test was his chance to live or die. Looking at each of them wielding a loaded gun, he became so frightened. He began to have negative thoughts toward the test. What if he failed the test out of being too nervous? Was there any chance for him to pass the test? And the question continues. Even a school test couldn't be as tedious as this particular one. Soon, he got the questions. They were 5. Have you been to Los Angeles in the last 3 weeks? Have you ever stolen anything from Los Angeles? Have you ever stolen anything from this gang? Have you ever sold cocaine? Do you know where the 70 kilos are? Though they were polar questions requiring either yes or no, it was difficult to answer. Ryan needed to take his time to answer each of them. Eventually, he gave negative answers to all the questions. Okay, that's all. The gang member who asked the questions concluded. At that point, Ryan had no idea if he passed the test or not. He only sat there, waiting for the judgment he deserved. Luckily, he was acquitted and discharged. That event alone made him have a rethink of the path he was walking. That night, when he got home, he looked at himself in the mirror. He realized he was becoming someone who chose drugs, crime, and money over my daughter and Nicole, the 2 people I loved the most. He broke down in tears and knew it wasn't the kind of life he wanted. He was left with 2 choices, to give up or to start all over. Ryan rather chose the second option. He wished he never went back to his vomit after his release, but he learned his lesson. He was left with nothing. Not even a cent he made from his marijuana business days. All of the monies had gone down the drain, either through loans or bad business. Even karma took its share of the whole proceeds. In 2011, Ryan formed Return to Happiness to give back to society through his own adversity, hope, and transformation. He became actively involved in activism to help eradicate human trafficking. Ryan realized there were a lot of at-risk youths who were walking the same path that landed him in trouble. So he thought they were his audience. He started by sharing his story with them. He recounted the mistakes he made, the consequences he had to face, and how he decided to rebuild his life. But there was one thing he wanted more than anything else. It was to get back to the United States to see my daughter. Luckily, his dream came true. In 2012, Ryan received a humanitarian waiver. The humanitarian waiver granted him access back to the USA. At that point, he began to focus on doing good in the world, and his efforts were reciprocated. He finally found his happiness after 12 long years. It came at a price, of course. There is an important lesson for us in the story of Ryan. Whatever we do in the past remains there. We can never undo the past. However, we have the present moment to create a better future for ourselves. And that's exactly what Ryan did. He understood how future events are created through the energy of the present thoughts, though it took him a few years and bad experiences to realize it. Now, he is also an international speaker that speaks on many aspects of our present-day reality. And that's the end of the story of Ryan's journey from a troubled past to a life dedicated to helping others. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos.